Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the scattered world of ours, especially across Eurasia, where we're going to revisit today. How is the war in Ukraine going? We have our new wonderful Prime Minister in Britain, Andy Burnham, who is doing his flexing Britain's mighty minuscule muscles yet again and playing macho about all the wonderful aid they're going to give Ukraine, to rebuild a country that has been totally destroyed by the ghastly leadership and direction of NATO and of Britain in particular. But what is really happening in that ongoing war? Well, the clique that has enslaved the Ukrainian people, what's left of them, is now targeting Russian civilians yet again. And of course, this is being turned upside down in the Western media, as usual, as we now know all too well. But other things are happening too. The war is escalating again. The fraction that is left of Ukraine is really not just a zombie state, as Colonel Doug McGregor says. It is also becoming a ghost state, a virtual state, a virtual fantasy to complement the virtual lives and virtual fantasies that not just ordinary people, but all our supposed wise policymakers make on the web to bring us a healthy dose of moral and geopolitical antibiotics to bring us back to reality. We have our old dear friend, much admired and respected, the outstanding analyst commenting US special military background, now commenting from Moscow. Stas, take it away.
Thank you, thank you. There's been certain developments. By the way, Burnham, when he came to Ukraine and promised to give the technology for Ukraine to produce the Storm Shadows, which first of all would be a very interesting thing because there's proprietary data in there from proprietary chipsets from the US. Without American permission, you can't even fire the Storm Shadows or Scalps, which country wants to call them what. To even give that away is an impossibility. Again, because of proprietary information, American information. So that's done, of course, for an absolutely different reason. Ukraine's not going to produce any scalp missiles in modern day Ukraine. They have no capability of doing it. They have no capability of putting it together. They have no capability of doing the chips that are the guidance systems. So why would they even bother to mention that? Well, because there's going to be what few missiles the UK and the French have left are going to be handed over, and they're going to be used for some kind of terrorist activity in the Russian deep. And this is a way of writing off, well, we didn't do this. It's the Ukrainians that did it with homemade Ukrainian scalp missiles or Storm Shadow. See, there's a stamp made in Ukraine, that just don't wipe it off. The ink is still fresh. And then we've seen that as a possibility for other things like Ukrainians were asking for tomahawks. Let us build the tomahawks, amongst other things. And nobody's going to do that. First of all, they have no
Exactly.
capability of doing that. So that's one. And there,
Marty, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. I
Okay, so
hope
must at
Stas
his
can.
end.
Yes, exactly. I hope nobody's playing dirty tricks with the communications. Wouldn't surprise
yeah,
me.
okay.
Oh, you're back,
That's
man.
probably
Good.
my, yeah, yeah.
No,
What
I was
was the
going to say
last thing I
I
said?
shamed them into unbugging you, Stas.
Okay,
What,
start
what
again.
was,
I'll
what,
cut this. Okay.
mm, what was the last thing that was
You were
said
talking about
before?
the
Plausible
tomahawks.
deniability. Yeah,
Oh yeah, it's plausible deniability from the British and from the French that these missiles are going to hit and probably hit civilians. So Ukraine has upped Ukraine, NATO has upped the ante as going after civilians more and more because hitting military targets is difficult. Hitting even industrial targets is difficult. Sure, you can hit large warehouses, by the way, wild berries, and I'm pretty sure Ozone by now, and probably Yandex Market also have all gone back to their previous warehousing model, which was dispersed small warehouses. I mean, they existed long before they built these giant warehouses, which are great during peacetime, but obviously make a gigantic target that's very hard, very difficult to defend because even if a drone is shot down near it, there's enough fuel in that drone when that drone parts fall. If they get burning fuel all over everything, it starts to burn. I mean, these modular buildings are just the way they are. That's a big problem with them. The other locations now have gun trucks. Russian corporations have been allowed to hire gun crews and put up gun trucks. So basically technicals. They take a lot of Patriot pickup trucks, put a gun mount behind them or in the chassis, in the bed. I'm sorry, and put a light machine gun on there, 7.62. And the 7.62 is very good at taking out these drones. These drones are relatively slow. I've seen these drones flying over my head multiple times. They're loud, but they're relatively slow. Even the faster, quieter Hornet drones, which are shorter distance because they're battery run instead of having liquid fuel, are still very easy to take out with machine gunners. And that's what Russia has done on the Rostov, Mariupol, and onto Zaporozhye interstate. Last I heard, and that was about a month ago, they took out some like 1,400 drones with machine gunners. And there was one website that actually they counted up how many trucks were destroyed and how many truck drivers were murdered. Most of the trucks were hit when they were parked to refuel at fueling stations and so on. But there were about 56 trucks that were hit. Most of the drivers were killed in the process. But when you count how many drivers, because that was touted in the West as a great success. We've cleared the logistics, we've cut off everybody. But when you count how many trucks actually traveled in those about 40, 50 days, it came out to something like 120. I'm sorry, it came out to 12,000 trucks. So 56 out of 12,000 is under 1% at that point. So the efficiency rate was pretty damn low, even for these types of terror attacks. So they've gone more after, because of these local battalions of machine gunners and machine gun trucks all over Russia, and these are growing numbers of these that are being set up. The easiest thing for the Ukrainians or for NATO, let's just be straightforward, for the Americans and Brussels to go after is civilians. Uh, Either civilian commercial infrastructure or civilian residencies. That's where they hit at night because they're trying to maximize the murder rate for civilians. They hit apartment buildings, they hit single residency houses. I mean, there's drone flights hitting everything that may cause casualties, and they've caused quite a few casualties. I mean, they're murdering at a rate of about 10 to 30 civilians a day, murdered, and then two, three times as many injured. They've hit summer resorts. I mean, there's nothing off limits to these people. Modern Western concept of virtuous warfare, because NATO is the white and fluffy bunny that's fighting for democracy, liberty, and the
Yay.
golden way of life in the garden is out to murder anything that moves. And Teal is a terrorist, and his company Palantir is a terrorist organization. Their drones that they manufacture, not just the software, but the drones that they manufacture. These Hornet drones, when they're down to about 20% power, they start looking for anything that moves. About 2 months ago, they took out an 11 and 12-year-old boy on a bicycle. Now, quite literally, if you have a grandmother pushing a pram, they'll go after that. Anything that moves. They call that clearing logistics. Yeah, euphemism for collateral damage, euphemism for weak target civilians. And that's what it is. It's exactly what it is. But what they're not talking about is actual developments on the ground. One of these key developments that it's now foreboding. If you notice, there's really no talk about what's going on the ground. Two very interesting developments that have happened recently. One is Russian forces from the south broke through into Orykhov. This is the last fortified town in Zaporozhye, short of Zaporozhye city itself, which is about 35 kilometers northeast. I'm sorry, northwest of Orykhov. That's when the lines really kind of start up again. Russia holds about 15% of the city and well, the town, and they're fighting inside of it right now and moving forward. And Ukraine has again thrown everything it has in reserves to try to stymie the Russian right wing that's closing in, and that's the right wing that's going from Dobropolye, Zaporozhye. There are three Dobropolyas, so let's keep it confusing. There's a town of Dobropolye, Zaporozhye. There's a town of Dobropolye, DNR, and south of the Dobropolye, DNR, there's a village called Dobropolye,
Mhm.
which means good field or nice field, depends how you want to translate it. Good field. So yeah, so they're throwing everything they can, and it's very limited success at this rate because they're basically out of troops. So that's one thing. Actually, there's been several developments. I'll add the other development in that's also a very interesting development. So the other major development at this point is Russian troops have entered the edges of Dobropolye DNR, which is southwest of Druzhinka. Druzhinka is there's about a 20-kilometer distance between them, maybe a little bit more, 30 kilometers between Dobropolye, DNR, and Druzhinka, which is the southernmost of the three town cities, agglomeration of fortified areas that's left in DNR. Well, between those two, there's a Russian spike that broke through about 5 days ago to a distance of not a few meters, not a few hundred meters, not even a kilometer, but 10 kilometers deep. Um, and now it's being held and it's being widened. And the Ukrainians so far haven't been able to take any major action to cut it off. And it's now its base is being widened out, and it brings them behind Druzhinka and almost behind Kramatorsk. So if they can continue pushing, they'll cut off those areas from behind. Even as there's a pincher movement that's already coming up from Konstantinovka into Druzhinka, and another one that's going to be soon forming in Krasnoyarman to come down into Slavinsk. And Russian forces east of those three cities are about 4.5 kilometers at the closest point. Some of the other points are further away, but they're evening out the battlefield and then and reorganizing to start moving directly in. So that area is already surrounded. It's the rear roads that come into Kramatorsk, for example, Slavinsk, are under Russian artillery, under Russian aviation, under Russian drone control, particularly rocket aviation. And there was a video I just saw recently of the new road of death. That's the road leading directly west out of Kramatorsk. It's netted up, everything else. Half the nets are destroyed. Just destroyed vehicles up and down that road and drones. And the video's filmed by a drone that was going past all of these destroyed vehicles, a Russian drone. So basically, they're already cut off. And when the rain comes in by late September, maybe earlier, it all depends. Those fields are going to turn to mud. I mean, you can run across those fields if you're going by yourself. It's a quagmire, but it's not that big of a quagmire because there's still plants on there holding the roots. But once you get vehicles in there, particularly track vehicles, they just rip up that top layer of vegetation and just churn up the mud, and then you get quagmire. You know, quite literally the word of quagmire, almost quicksand in its liquefied form. So those once that happens, the other thing that's going to happen in parallel with the rains is the fog is going to come back. Most of the year, that area has fog, and when I mean fog, it's pea soup fog, and it literally rolls in. I've been in that fog more than a few times in my life. You can't see a few meters ahead of you. Drones don't fly in fog. There's no point in bringing a drone in the fog. You can't see where you're flying. You'll probably wind up hitting a tree or something. And if you fly over the fog, you're not going to see anything in that fog. But with the advent of satellites, even if you're in the fog, you can still see which direction you're going. Navigation systems. So you can now use the fog to move troops up closer to the front or to attack. Uh, and with the fog also comes rain and wind, and all of that is very anti-drone weather warfare. But on top of that, the drone of today is the machine gun of 1914. The Western colonial powers knew the strength of the machine gun because they used it on the locals. But for some reason, they never quite connected that the spear chuckers you're shooting right now, that machine gun is that Maxim is going to work just as well against much better dressed spear chuckers called a rifle with a bayonet with white skin charging at you in World War One. For some reason, those generals never made that connection. Brown and black and yellow guys, yeah, they die real well under a machine gun. Oh, so do white people. It doesn't really matter. The machine gun doesn't care, and the machine gun stopped all movement. And of course, everybody said that's it. The offensive is over because to try to break that, they tried horse charges, cavalry charges, which yes, they moved much faster than the infantry, but they just made bigger targets. So that's all over. There's no more maneuver warfare, even though there was still maneuver warfare on the Eastern Front. It was just too big to do a trench front like the Western Front. I mean, about four times, five times more territory, and you just couldn't cut those trenches. But there was localized trenches. But everybody, the wisdom of the moment was that's it. Maneuver warfare's over. It's gonna be that. It's just trenches, machine gun rules, and then you got airplanes, particularly airplanes that could strafe and drop bombs, and then you got tanks, and maneuver warfare is back. And then the Panzerfaust appeared in German hands in 41, 42. That's it. Tanks are over, and tanks got heavier. They got thicker armor, and we're back to that. Then we had the Sagger in 64 with the Egyptians, taking out the Israeli. They took out almost two Israeli brigades. Or first days of that, everybody's already screwing. See the Sagger again. That's a much more powerful missile. It's all over. And then the Israelis came back with infantry on the tanks and shot the Sagger teams. So every time, everybody constantly screams. Well, now we got drones, and everybody again is screaming. That's it. Tank maneuver warfare is out of the question. Well, Russia developed the Air system, which was an anti-rocket, anti-missile, anti-RPG system for tanks. And what it does is it's a block about a little bigger than this. And what it well, actually, it's about twice the size of this. And what it is there's a radar system that picks up incoming munition, and the block is shot out into the path of the where's the camera? There's into the path of the munition, and it explodes out right in its pathway, right in its face, and destroys that munition along with itself. Well, there was a convoy last week of four Russian tanks and an armored infantry personnel carrier. I mean, these guys have balls of steel because they're basically testing a concept, and there were tanks with different amounts of grills on there and such. And at least two of those tanks were destroyed at the end. But I didn't see, and they were burned at the end because there was drones that flew into the hatches. But I didn't see any bodies, so hopefully the guys got out alive, got back to their lines. But what was the interesting thing about these tanks is they were carrying the IRIS system, except it's been reprogrammed. And from what analysts were saying, who directly watched most of these videos, the Ukrainians, what they posted, they chip chopped it up to make it look like one strike, one kill. But what the reality of these videos was, one of the tanks took almost 20 drones to destroy it. The air system worked. It was taking drones out. It just ran out of blocks eventually. It got enough drones. And the other one also took some like 12, 14 drones to take it out. Whereas otherwise, earlier, you would have used up maybe three drones, two, three, four drones to burn the tank when it's already not a mobility kill and it's no longer moving. Now you're looking at five times. And that's if the next generation doesn't have, instead of 12 blocks, 24 blocks or 36 blocks. True, again, infantry can't ride on the tank, but then again, we have reactive armor anyways, so infantry can't ride on the tanks. That's all gone out. That's something that's permanently changed as long as you have reactive armor, because they just blow the infantry off with the charge. So, but if you start, how many of these blocks can you mount on a tank? Probably quite a few. And in parallel, we've had actually it was first a Ukrainian tank that appeared with this, and then Russian tanks started appearing with it, with jamming systems so powerful that there was nothing that could get through to it unless it was flying on a cable. That's the only way to get in. And I've been told the guys are being told don't stick your head out the hatch. Just the radiation, the microwave radiation is just a little too strong. I don't know, maybe. But the survivability of mechanized warfare is becoming much greater. Now, here's the problem too for the drone operators. First of all, what from my friends are telling me on the front lines right now, the Ukrainian drones are flying sketchy like that. And what that means is the drone operators are not as well experienced as they were because they're losing people and they're losing a lot of drone operators, which means that they're pumping people through the whatever drone school they have to get them out in the field. Now, these drone operators, they go out as close as they can to the line of contact, set up somewhere in a wood line or in some abandoned house, and start launching drones from that. So they're carrying these drones. It's usually a two, maybe three-man team. They got the rucksack with their whatever they need in there, plus their food, plus their ammunition, plus their weapons, and then they're also carrying a bunch of drones on their backs. So some of these, and Russians do the exact same thing. Some of these guys may be carrying 10, 15, 20 of these FPV drones with them. So they're packed up. I mean, they're hanging off of them in all directions. Now, if you could take out armored vehicles with three, four drones, that's one thing. If you got to take 20 drones to take out one armored vehicle, that's a whole different reality. That's one. Two, they're efficient, somewhat efficient, because the line of contact isn't moving very fast. If their drone operators are up front, they can set up. True, they tend to get killed off. And by the way, the Chinese have developed. I'm not sure whether it's in Russian hands yet, but I'm pretty sure it will be if it isn't. The Chinese have developed a drone operator detecting drone, which goes out there. It's looking and flies out into the deep. All it does is it's got it's got a radio locator on it, and it's just looking for radio signals. Once it finds the radio signals, it sends back the coordinates, and then the artillery starts working. And since Ukraine basically doesn't have artillery anymore, but Russia does, the majority of Ukrainian casualties are still from Russian artillery, whereas the majority of Russian casualties are from Ukrainian drones. And then again, if you can get any kind of mobility, even limited mobility, small aero movements, it makes a drone operator's life hell because he's up front. He's not that mobile. He's on foot. He's got a bunch of drones that he's carrying with him. And if the front is moving, him and his battle buddy or two battle buddies may suddenly find themselves overrun. So this becomes a very big problem for the drone operators. So again, it lowers the quantitative and qualitative capability of the drone operators, which even further enhances mobility. Mobility build on mobility. So we'll see. And the last on that, the Chinese now all three sides are working on microwave EMP devices. Now Russia has one. It used it once in 24 or 23, I'm sorry, but it's a non-directional weapon system. And the Poles just wiped out basically a good chunk of one of the oblasts, burned out all the electronics in there. So it worked. It took out the drones. It took out everybody's drones. It took out a lot of the power stations. It took out everything. I mean, they just blackened it all out, and radios and everything else. But these are directional. These are directional area suppression systems. The Chinese had three of these trucks on display during the last big parade for Victory Day parade. These things, if they function the way they're advertised, it's a decently large truck with six axles or three axles on it. They can reach out up to 5 kilometers in over in an arc of about 120, maybe 180 degrees in width. Up to 5 kilometers. Well, it's area dependent, of course. If it's an open area, up to 5 kilometers. Cities, places like that, of course, would be less. And it does a EMP pulse, microwave EMP pulse. It'll burn out anything that's not protected. Again, you can protect drones. It's just they won't fly after that because they become too heavy. There's different ways you can set up electromagnetic mesh on them or just put lead on them. But then again, that's you're dealing away with its ability to fly or carry a combat load. So yes, so there's technology is moving along.
Because Stas,
We'll see soon.
fantastic exposition. I mean, technology moves
Exactly.
fast. And of course, NATO is
Yes,
preparing for the
yes.
last war. And what you're saying, most people in the West think, oh, it's a drone war, but you're talking about future technologies and the
Yeah.
ways that trying to neutralize each other. Just one sort of idiot question. If drones do most of their damage by going through the hatch of the opposing side's vehicle, why don't they just close the hatch?
Well, they don't. It depends. First of all, it depends on the vehicle. Absolutely depends on the vehicle. When it comes to tanks, what they'll do is there's two issues here. One, they normally do a mobility kill first, so they're going after the tracks, or rather, not even the tracks. They're going after if you can hit the sprocket, that's the best thing because that's a transmission. There, what people understand, all those wheels on a tank or on a Caterpillar vehicle, they're just there to keep the Caterpillar running along those wheels. There's only one sprocket, which is your transmission, that's turning all of that. You take that sprocket out, that's it. That caterpillar on that side no longer turns. It has nothing to to push it forward. And that becomes a target, obviously. So that's one way. You mobility kill the tank. The problem with the top layer of the tank, first of all, it depends what you're driving. You know, if you're flying in drones that are carrying a grenade, okay, fine, you're not going to penetrate the tank. You may, if you're lucky, hit the gun tube and rupture the gun tube, in which case the main gun can't fire anymore. You still got machine guns. What you, but if you're carrying an RPG round, like an RPG 6 or an RPG 7 or anything larger, you can go through the top. You can go through the top hatches, because the secret is tanks don't have armor up top. They just have a steel plate and a steel hatch. Because that's what the Javelin's built on. It flies in, goes up, and then hits down on the hatches because that's where engineers saved weight. Because before that, this is one of the reasons, by the way, tanks don't go into cities unless they're there to support the infantry. In which case, a tank just becomes a mobile infantry gun, like the Krupps were for the Germans. That's why the Germans didn't even bother putting a turret in. They just built up a tower with a gun on it, and they didn't bother putting a roof over it because what's the point? It's just a infantry support gun. But if a tank goes into a city, it just becomes an infantry support gun. It can't shoot above it. It has to have infantry that's keeping it alive to keep anybody from slapping it from above. But that's where tanks save. Engineers have saved weight by just keeping just enough armor up top that when shells explode, not directly, any 155 round shell hits any tank, that tank is dead. Or 152. I mean, it's dead. But when the shells are exploding around it, so when the shrapnel's flying, it doesn't penetrate through from the top. And so you get about that thick slab of steel above you. That's all the armor there is. So if somebody's shooting RPGs down, like an RPG 6, on a closed hatch, yeah, the first one may not go through, but it'll probably crack the steel. The second or third one definitely will go through. So when these tanks are abandoned, when they're no longer mobility capable, they'll start hitting them from above. Most of the time, they're going through hatches because the crews abandoned the tank at that point.
Okay, right.
They've left the hatches open. Now, infantry fighting vehicles are different. Armored cars are totally different because of the amount of armor on there. Oftentimes, you can hit them in the side. You don't need them to be abandoned. You can hit them in the side and penetrate, especially if you're carrying an RPG round. But these are larger drones. The smaller drones are carrying smaller amounts of explosives for obvious reasons. The smaller kamikaze drones.
So just Stas, one last question. That's it. Um, a lot of the Western media talking about I mean, the prisoner ratio is like 30 to 1 in the Russians' favor, and the death when they swap dead bodies is like 30 to 1. And the excuse was that the Russians were advancing, so they were picking up all the Ukrainian dead, and they didn't need to pick up Russian dead from the Ukrainians. But now, when the borders are not moving, and there's still that ratio. So in fact, that supports the idea that the Russians are killing far more Ukrainians and vice versa, does it not?
Well, first of all, the front is moving. It's moving everywhere, just about
Wow.
everywhere. So that's part of it. And yes,
Right.
it's true that Russia is, of course, picking up its own dead. So its own dead are a lot. But so it's not a 50-to-1 ratio or 40-to-1 ratio. It's probably closer anywhere from 3 to 4 to 1 to 10,
Right.
12 to 1, area
Okay.
dependent, and how much support
Mhm.
systems. But the front's moving, and on
Okay.
top of that, I will tell you the 1,000 to 40 or 30 bodies. There are at least 100,000 bodies in or remains of bodies in morgue storage in Russia, and there's hundreds more thousands laying around being eaten by crows, by wolf. Well, no, there's no wolves there, but there's feral dogs. Same thing in the end. It's lupus familiaris, or by rats. And a friend of mine sent me a photo of a rat that they killed. The body of the rat was about that big. It was actually a little bit bigger than that. It was almost the size of a Kalashnikov from the handle to the barrel. And
Wow.
that's not counting the tail of the rat. I mean,
Wow.
these rats get huge. They eat. Well, there's plenty of food. Rotting meat is everywhere.
Wow.
Crows, dogs, pigs, feral pigs are all over the place from all these farms that got blown. And a pig. The problem with once a pig's got into, they eat everything except for. I'm gonna get a little graphic here, but they eat everything except for nails and teeth.
Wow.
So trying to locate bodies becomes a very difficult concept because a pig will just eat right through everything.
Wow.
Dogs and other animals, they'll scatter remains, but you can still put the bodies together and then try to return something,
Mm.
at least bones. But pigs are god awful for that.
Mm.
My grandmother, she was from Kharkov. She would cook pork, but she would never taste it. She'd always get a neighbor to taste it. She would not touch pork. And that was because in 1944, as the Red Army passed through and farming came back to that portion of Novorossiya, the Kharkov area, there wasn't any food for the pigs. Well, okay. There wasn't any usual food for the pigs. There were lots of dead Germans laying around. So a lot of these farmers, they found food for their pigs. And she'd seen that, and after that, she just couldn't eat pork anymore because
Wow.
she'd seen the pigs eating bodies.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, it's a fact of life.
Sure.
But
And
there's
it
a
makes me
lot
wonder
of
what happened in the trenches of northern France. I mean, in Europe or Western Europe, in the UK, that's the big thing. But what you're talking about is a Somme
rats.
multiplied by 10 and happening right now, not 110 years
Huh?
ago.
Yeah,
Exactly.
British 18-year-olds are reading about the Somme and shedding a tear, and then barely realizing that this sort of savagery is going on right now. Marty, you look at me. Also, I'm going to say thank you very much, Stas. That was an incredible account of what's going on. There seems to be some interruption there, or some, but you've already told us it's one of the best shows we've had,
Here,
and one of
here.
the best podcasts anywhere on this topic of what's really going on the front line. It shows you that innovation is happening, technology is changing the parameters very quickly, and I think most people are way behind on this. People who are
Oh, yeah.
interested.